The Gem State is changing every day, and as it does, the Idaho Matters podcast will help you know more about the changing communities and governments and cultures of Idaho. Listen to Idaho Matters today at boisestatepublicradio.org or in your favorite podcast app.
From Boise State Public Radio, this is The Connector. It's Idaho's daily news. Good morning. I'm George Prentice. Well, court proceedings in that challenge to Idaho's abortion bans have come to an end, so we've got a full report from the Ada County Courthouse. We'll also tell you how some members of the State Board of Education aren't thrilled with the idea that the legislature wants to push back against diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Plus, we've got the all-important forecast. It is Friday, the 22nd of November, and here are today's stories. Well, after a pretty wild weather week, let's start with just that, the weather. And Jay Breidenbach is over at the National Weather Service office. Jay, good morning.
Happy Friday and good morning to you, George.
Thank you so much. What can we expect today?
Well, we still have some rain showers scattered across the area. It's little pieces of that big storm that's been along the Pacific coast continue to move through the area. Nothing too heavy in our area. The heaviest activity with that storm has been along the coast, but, it's been snowing in the mountains. It has warmed up a little bit, though. Snow levels have come up to about 8,000 feet, so some of that snow's getting rain on it today up there.
And what does Saturday look like?
Well, so this is interesting. We should have a little bit of a break in the weather overnight tonight. Get into Saturday, there's a little bit of a cold front coming through, and so that's going to bring another round of showers to the valleys. Temperatures cool back down a little bit, and snow levels come back down in the mountains. So, those ski resorts could pick up a little bit more snow. Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, it's starting to look wintry up there.
Wow, fresh powder. And I heard there might be a short break after this, yes?
It does look like the weather pattern becomes less active as we get into next week. Yeah. So probably a little more sunshine. Nice. Not particularly warm, but not bitter cold either as we approach Thanksgiving. And the weather looks drier, so hopefully that'll be good for people, traveling to different places across the area.
Jay Breidenbach at the National Weather Service office in Boise. Court proceedings in the trial challenging Idaho's abortion bans came to an end on Thursday at the Ada County Courthouse, a day after the attorneys representing the state presented their arguments. The lawsuit represents 4 women who say they had to leave the state to get medically necessary abortions for non-viable pregnancies. Julie Lucata tells us where things stand right now.
The plaintiffs say the bans are unconstitutional and infringe on their rights to happiness and safety. Attorneys for the state argued Idahoans have no constitutional right to an abortion. During testimonies, 4 of the plaintiffs tearfully recounted finding out their wanted pregnancies were not developing appropriately and described the added trauma of having to travel out of state while fearing medical complications. Physicians represented in the complaint also said the law is confusing because it doesn't clarify when they can intervene to preserve the health of a patient. The suit wants the law amended to include allowances for patients with complications, pre-existing conditions, and lethal fetal diagnoses. Under Idaho State Code, they can only provide abortions when the life of the mother is threatened. The defense says the bans are clear. 2 doctors testifying for the state said they had not seen any changes in the way they treat patients since the law went into effect. The trial ended without closing statements as both plaintiffs and defendants asked for time to review the transcripts and evidence presented in the courtroom. Once they receive those copies, they will have 6 weeks to review and respond. A written decision in the case is expected at a later date. Julie Duqueta, Boise State Public Radio News.
Earlier this week, we told you how a judge had struck down Wyoming's abortion bans, and the arguments the judge made are considered to be the first of their kind. And Hannah Merzbach has that story.
In 2012, voters gave Wyomingites the right to make their own health care decisions. California law professor and historian Mary Ziegler says this happened in several states where mainly Republicans wanted to signal disapproval of the Affordable Care Act.
To protect what they saw as, adults' ability to make their own healthcare decisions free from the federal government.
But she says in Wyoming, this amendment is coming back to bite those same Republicans who are now trying to ban abortion.
It's striking to see this judge taking an approach that's really fairly unique to Wyoming.
For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Hannah Merzbach.
Some Idaho State Board of Education members say they worry that proposed policies to push back against diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives could go too far. James Dawson explains.
The draft rules require Idaho's public colleges and universities to be politically neutral in their official capacity and to support free speech. But one rule would forbid institutions from having central offices, policies, procedures, or initiatives dedicated to DEI. State Board Executive Director Josh Whitworth.
They're really about trying to set the expectation that we are holistically looking at students as a whole body and how we move those students towards successful outcomes.
Some board members like Kurt Liebig say they don't want this policy to be written so broadly that it would close efforts to help certain students like veterans, Native Americans, or first-generation college students.
We want every student to be successful, but we have to recognize that every student comes to our campuses from a different starting point.
Whitworth says board staff will begin meeting with top college administrators to discuss the draft rules and plan to bring them back for approval in the near future. James Dawson, Boise State Public Radio News.
And that is today's episode of The Connector. I'm George Prentice. We'll see you back here on Monday. To stay in touch with the news between now and then, check out BoiseStatePublicRadio.org or download the free Boise State Public Radio app and tell your friends about The Connector. And thanks for listening.
No matter what happens in Washington, the NPR Politics Podcast is here for you. For the latest news, insights, and analysis from the election and beyond, listen to the NPR Politics Podcast.